What's going on YouTube? This is Ribo back at the bench today, and this time I've got another cut or carry or ramble or head-to-head video. Not really sure what to call this one, but taking a look at the Tiscribe, the Urban Survival Gear Tiscribe, specifically version 3, which is this one right here. So this is the all titanium full-size version of, or version 3 of the Tiscribe. And also on the bench here, you see my version 2 Tiscribe. So yes, there are enough differences with the version 3 over the version 2 to really justify its own full review, but not really. I mean, kind of, yes, I could do a separate video, but for me at least, it makes a lot more sense to kind of talk about them together. And so this is kind of a cut or carry on the version 3. It's kind of a head-to-head between both of them, but really it's probably me just rambling for a few minutes and telling you which one I like more. So without further ado, let's get into it. So let's do a quick size comparison. So again, version 3, and the version 3 is the smaller version. There are other differences, but for the purpose of this video, when you're looking at them, just remember version 3, smaller, version 2, larger. And I will throw out the Pilot G2 just as a point of reference, which in a lot of ways is kind of in between these two versions. So you can see size-wise, I mean, it kind of depends on if you want to include that right there, but you can see it's kind of in the middle, but closer to the version 2 overall. The big difference that I want to point out between the two pens, and I'm going to leave the Pilot G2 on the bench here for a second because I want to compare it as well, is the thickness. So it's really interesting. So if you look at the version 2, you'll see 9.6, 9.5, yeah, 9.6 along the pin body there, and I keep getting either 9.6 or 9.5. So let's call it 9.5 there along the tube body there. If you look at the version 3, 10.1, so a little over 0.5 millimeter thicker on the version 3. And just to baseline it, if you were to look on the kind of plastic tube of the Pilot G2, 9.9. So again, the Pilot G2 is kind of in the middle of these, but what I really want to highlight is that this pin, the version 3, is about 0.5 millimeter thicker than the version 2. And that doesn't sound like a lot, and I guess we're getting into the review. But in the hand, that's actually quite substantial. At least I have noticed it when I've written with this pen. Now, I wish that I still had my what's the name of that pen? The tactile turn bolt, because that was another titanium pen that I really liked, but it was ultimately a little bit too thick. I think I still gave it a carry and I liked it, but over time, and especially once I got the Tiscribe version 2 here, that pen just felt like writing with a Sharpie almost. And I think a friend of mine compared it to that. It's kind of saying it in a good way. And I can certainly see that, but for me at least, it was just too thick for kind of daily use. The version 3 reminds me of that a little bit. Now it's not that big, and honestly, it feels pretty good in hand. If I didn't have the version 2 to compare it against, I don't know that I would really notice that as a downside of this pen. But the problem is, for the better part of a year, I've been writing with the version 2 here, which is super, super skinny. And so when I have been writing with this daily and then I pick up the version 3, it just feels kind of chunky to me. I think too because it's a little bit shorter, but yet it's heavier because of, I guess, more material or thicker material or whatever. But it is a little bit heavier in terms of the overall size, because it is a little bit shorter than the version 2. And so for me, first of all, kind of a downside, it's a little bit heavy, heavier than I expected at least. And I think combined with the size of it, I would definitely expect it to be a little bit lighter, as well as maybe a little bit thinner. So that's kind of one thing that I haven't loved so far. And you can see I'm not following my traditional format of things I like and dislike and all that. So this is kind of just a weird video. But anyway, all right, so next things. Another thing that I was a little bit bummed by, this is totally personal preference. I mean, this is really aesthetic only. But one thing that I really loved about the version 2 over time is that on the ridges right here that give you some texture to grip on, you can see you have this kind of stonewash tie finish. My lighting's not the great, so I'm not the greatest, so I'm not sure if you can see this, but you have kind of a stonewashed finish here. But then you have a shiny finish right there in between those grooves, which is a kind of a nice little detail. And visually, and again, you can't really tell it in the light here, unfortunately, but visually it's just really nice. With the version 3, the entire thing is stonewashed, which doesn't look bad. And again, the only reason that I consider it a downside is that I have the version 2 to compare it against. When you put them side by side, I love the look of the version 2 here. This looks a little bit drab to me. Now that's going to be totally, total personal preference. Everyone's probably going to have a different opinion on that. But it's just a minor detail that I thought was pretty cool about the version 2. It showed, maybe a little bit more attention to detail, and it showed, I don't know, something a little bit interesting. So that's that. And now let's talk about really the biggest difference that I see between these two pins, and that is the bolt mechanism and the pocket clip. So from a pocket clip standpoint, in my opinion, that was really the version 2's biggest flaw. So you have this beautiful pin, but you have this tiny little pocket clip, and the size, the length of the pocket clip isn't really the issue in my opinion, but it's kind of how flimsy it is. Really, really skinny piece of titanium here. You have a clip that's not making contact. That is intentional, and the version 3 carries the same design through there. So that is an intentional thing, which is fine, but it has really made me a little bit concerned about bending this clip out. Overall, it just feels like a fairly flimsy clip. Nothing super special about it. I do like if you can see that, the Torx bits there. Having a lot of trouble with lighting today, apparently. But the pocket clip was just never really something that was super flashy about the pin. It was just kind of there, but that's it. On the version 3, the pocket clip has gotten beefier. I think that it looks a lot better. You don't have the branding out here, which I think is a good thing, because that branding just looks, I don't know, it doesn't look great on there. I mean, it's fine, but you actually have branding on the interior of the pocket clip, which maybe you can see the Made in Texas down there with the Urban Survival Gear logo, which is pretty cool. Honestly, that is, I believe, how the tactile turn bolt did it as well. They had something on the inside there. So that's pretty cool, pretty sleek, but overall the pocket clip is just more robust. It looks better. I would hazard a guess that it's probably less likely to bend out. And overall, I just think it fits the profile of the pin a lot better than the version 2. So that is something that I really like. Another thing about the pocket clip that I really like is that they've added this bevel here to the top. And so with any bolt action pin, you're going to be pushing down here, right? With the version 2 here, you don't really have a flat surface there. You've got this kind of weird place to bend your, or to apply pressure. And it doesn't really make sense. It's a little bit uncomfortable. I don't notice it a ton. I mean, I did when I first got the pin. But it's not super comfortable. With the version 3 here, that's exactly what you need. You've got a little bit of jimping on there, but that bevel in itself is just enough to give you great purchase on the bolt there and actuate the pin, and that's awesome. Unfortunately, so to, I guess, kind of combine with that, you have a new kind of bolt design here. So on the version 2, you come down and over, and you can see that you've got the open tube back there and the mechanism here, and you're really coming all the way over. So you've got that hard cutaway, so you've got to kind of come all the way down to release it, and then you release it back. So it's much more intentional, and the release is much snappier. On the version 3, it's totally different. So instead, you've got this kind of bean shape, doesn't have a hard cut, and so when you bring the bolt down, unlike on the version 2, where you have the entire length of this opening here where you can bring, if I can describe this, you can bring the bolt down all the way until you push it over. Unlike that, on the version 3 here, you only have a short area that you can bring the bolt down. And what that does is that forces the bolt down and over in the same kind of, in the same track, I guess. And so what that means is it's kind of dummy proof. So you push it down and it's going to push it over for you. And then you release it, you just kind of pop it back over. There are benefits to that for sure. And this is going to be another thing that's like, if I didn't have this one to compare against, I really wouldn't care. I don't love this quite as much. And I really like the pocket clip. I like the bolt. I like the kind of bean and like how that works. I find it a bit awkward. It may be because the pin is a little bit shorter than the other one. It's probably just because I'm used to the version 2 and I really like it. This functions better, I think, but I don't like it as much. So kind of take that for what you will. It works just fine, but to me, in my hands, it just feels a little bit awkward. So I can't figure out if that's design flaw or if that's a Ribo flaw. I'm leaning towards the latter because that's usually what it is. But, you know, take that into consideration. Apart from those few things, I think the real big difference is the price in these. But honestly, I don't talk price a ton on this channel, and particularly for something like this, I feel like talking price is kind of dumb, because here's the deal. You can't get the version 2s anymore. You can't even get version 2 parts anymore. I would love to have some parts to a version 2 like this to be able to play around with it, but you just can't find them. They've moved on to the version 3. That's kind of the next iteration. It makes sense, but it's too bad. So the version 3 is where it's at. The version 3 is $140. I grabbed one when they were released because I wanted to check it out compared to the version 2. I don't remember what I paid for the version 2. I don't think it was much over $100. I could be totally wrong. I'll have to go back and look at the video again. But it's an expensive pen. If I were to pick between the two of them, I prefer the version 2. If I didn't have the version 2, I would think this is a very nice pen, and I would probably recommend it. It is very expensive, and so I think there's a lot of my opinions on these that is probably soured by the fact that I just absolutely love the version 2. I guess the one thing, I think I saw Shabazz mention this as well, this is in a lot of ways kind of a different class of pen. And to me, this is just kind of a different pen altogether. The version 2, just in a lot of ways, works for me in a way that the version 3 doesn't. But I can see that there is a lot of design development put into this, and there are a lot of things about this that are just objectively better. That being said, for me, it's a bit overpriced compared to my old trusty version 2, and I would definitely choose the version 2. However, they're Tiscribes, and they're awesome because of that. So get one while you can. Anyway, hope you have enjoyed this disjointed, weird, cutter carry, ramble, head-to-head thing, and I'll see you next time.